Next, we'll move on to our next presenter, Mr. David Andrist, who is the Outreach Education Coordinator for the OSU AIDS Clinical Trial Unit and the Program Manager for the AIDS Education and Training Center at OSU's Wexner Medical Center. He will be presenting on research at OSU's Infectious Diseases Clinic. And friendly reminder that we'll give you a 5-minute warning and your presentation will end at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting us to participate in this great program. I really appreciate you doing things like this to continue the education. I'll start with a little bit about myself. I was the old guy in the chat box that put 19. I think I was the only brave person to put my age that might have been around back then. I was at Miami University when this was all starting and just trying to figure out who I was. I certainly wasn't an out gay man at that time, but I remember hearing bits and pieces about this going on. One of the things that I'll never forget is seeing on a bathroom wall that Vaseline causes AIDS. I'm like, wow. I didn't bother to go look that up anywhere. We didn't have internet back then. So, you know, I've moved forward a lot in my progress with HIV. As far as my jobs, I started out as a school teacher, a middle school teacher in a small town in Northwest Ohio where I grew up. After I graduated from college, that was the job that was open. And so I went, I loved it. I had a blast working with middle schoolers, but I didn't have much of a life and I would come to Columbus a lot. And so I started to get involved with the Columbus AIDS Task Force, which Matthew recently talked about. And we were a small organization of 12 people that really helped people just die with dignity. We had a case management arm and a prevention education arm. And back then, funding allowed us to just educate people in the community. We had programs in bars, coffee shops, houses, wherever, and 25 and 30 people would attend because they wanted to know, what is this? How do we prevent it? How do we use condoms? How do we talk to partners about sex? How do we do all that kind of good stuff? So I've unfortunately have seen the evolution of HIV in my lifetime, in my adult lifetime, and I'm thrilled that I am able to now be working at the Ohio State University Infectious Disease Clinic in our HIV research. So today I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what is research and review why it's important, discuss why we do HIV research here at OSU, review the clinical trial process, explain our involvement in the AIDS clinical trial group, which is kind of the larger umbrella, give an overview of current HIV clinical trials and successes that we are involved with here, and then provide a resource for folks to get involved in research. So what does research do? Research is answering a question. If you don't know the answer to the question, how do we find it out? We do research. We look at difficult scientific or health questions. We find out what procedures are going to be good, how tests work, what investigational medicines may work. We look at how they work in gender, age, and race. And we also do some non-experimental observation, just watching and measuring over the course of time that may not involve a procedure or a drug. Why HIV clinical trials? We've already heard in the beginning about AZT. You've seen that amazing presentation of how this all started by Dr. McDowell. AZT was the first thing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but we needed to do something. People were dying with this disease, and so what investigational treatments are safe? Do these treatments work the same in women, in men, and children, and what are the side effects? Those are the kind of things that we look at in clinical trials. What are the advantages of participating in a clinical trial? If you are a clinical trial participant, you kind of get a better health covering, if you will. You get more frequent monitoring of your health status, early detection if something's going on, there's a complication, because when you're involved in a clinical trial, oftentimes we ask you to come in on a pretty regular basis. It's not just see your doctor once a year and come back. We need you to come in sometimes monthly, depending on the study, just to make sure things are going well. We can help people learn how to take medicines correctly. Sometimes that's part of the clinical trial process. Folks will bring their meds with them every day and say, okay, wait, you have too many of this one and not enough of this one. What's going on here? And so we can give them that personalized, this is how we need to help you with taking that medication. Again, talking about AZT, early access to investigational medications. None of the Ryan White, none of the support money programs were available in the early 80s. And so there was nothing to do. If you were diagnosed with HIV, what do? You came to the Ohio State University AIDS Clinical Trial Unit because they at least had something. And that's kind of where we got started. Some studies show that people who participate in clinical trials do better than people that don't. Other advantages is the altruistic, and we have tons and tons of heroes in HIV that are no longer with us, and some who are still with us, thank God, that they were involved for an altruistic reason. I know when I sign a consent form that says this study may not be a benefit to you, but it may benefit us in the future. And that's what a lot of the folks that were involved in the AIDS clinical trial group really wanted to do. They knew, all right, in the early days, the writing was on the wall. There wasn't much time that somebody was going to live. But if I helped the clinical trials unit look at this medication and come in for these appointments and let them draw my gallons and gallons of blood and let them look at that, maybe in the future it could be where we are now, where there's one pill a day. Also, free lab work, trial medicines were free. And then you really do get a personalized, friendly, confidential care. Our research nurses and our research staff are people the study participants and volunteers developed a relationship with over a long period of time. And so it's kind of like you felt like a partner. You weren't just going to your doctor once a year and you hope to remember to ask those questions. In a research study, you're going to really develop that personal relationship with those folks. So what is a clinical trial? Clinical trial is a research study performed in people that are aimed at evaluating a medical, surgical, or behavioral intervention. They are a primary way researchers find out a new treatment or drug or diet or medical device is safe and effective in people. Often a clinical trial is used to learn if a new treatment is more effective and or has less harmful side effects than standard treatment. Sorry for reading that long definition, but I think it's a good kickoff. A lot of the clinical trials we're doing in HIV research now are looking at, we develop standards of care. We know how to take good care of people. You heard U equals U. We know how important it is to get people's viral loads undetectable and have them adhere to the medicines that keep them undetectable, and people can do well. Now what we're doing is, can we make better medications? Some of those early medications had a lot of side effects. So what we've done is determined what works against the virus in that medication and what is causing the toxicity to the other things that they don't really need, and change the development of those medications to limit or reduce some of those side effects. Different types of clinical research. We have treatment research, which I talked a lot about. We look at medications, psychotherapy, new devices. Prevention research. There's a lot. PrEP was mentioned earlier. I'm going to talk about PrEP in a little bit because we should talk a lot more about PrEP, and hopefully more people will learn about PrEP. Prevention research is just as important as treatment for people living with disease. Diagnostic research looks at better ways to identify particular conditions or disorders. Back in those early days, in the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s, when an HIV test was developed, you went to the health department, you had your blood drawn, and you waited 2 weeks, 2 excruciatingly painful, scary, frightening weeks to walk back in and shake until they said you're negative. Now we have point of care tests where you can get that result in 20 minutes. ohiv.org that I put in the chat box earlier when they were talking about this will offer you a at-home HIV test. So you can go online, order an at-home HIV test, and do it all yourself if you want. They are so available, I think, on the market. They're kind of expensive. And screening research. We've learned so much. We know how to look at viral loads. So we can say when your viral load is undetectable, U equals U, undetectable equals uninfectious. We also look at the quality of life. A lot of our research studies will add additional questionnaires to say, how are you doing? How does this feel? Are you glad you were in this? Do you hate that you were in this? One of the important things for some of the new long-acting injectable medications is, what do you like about this? What don't you like about it? We find out, quality of life. I don't have to take pills every day, so I'm not reminded of HIV. I do have to get that shot in the butt, and that hurts for a while. But you know what? I'd rather get the shot than take the pills. So, some people have that attitude. Some people it's a little bit different. We do more and more genetic studies. Most of our studies now, when we sign the consent form, there's a little bit of an extra piece in there to let people know that, we'd like to keep your blood and the things that we're collecting from you to look at genetics to see if we can somehow find a way to identify people who may be prone to some certain disorders, and can we develop treatments based on that genetic makeup to help stop that. And we also look at epidemiological, how many people in certain groups. So the phases of clinical trials, you'll often see this is a phase 1, this is a phase 2. So we do phase 1 through 3 here at OSU. Phase 1 is just the first beginning. Here's a medication we think might do something. Looks good in the test tube, looks good in some other animal things we've studied in. So now we're going to bring this into a very small group of people. And what we want to do is just see, is it safe? Is it safe, and how much of a dose do we need to use? And then what kind of side effects are happening to people? After that, we go, okay, this is looking pretty good. So we go to phase 2. Phase 2, we need to do this in a larger group of people. And we continue to look at the safety of it. What are side effects, that kind of thing. And then we also look at, is it effective? Is it answering that question that we're hoping it will answer? Then we look into phase 3, where we do a large group of people. A lot of our medication studies are at phase 3 studies. We want to put 300-400 people in a study. We want to confirm that, you know what, this is really doing what it's supposed to do. Here are the side effects that happen. We're not surprised. They're okay. Everybody's doing okay with that. And then we move forward. And then hopefully they move forward to get an FDA approval for that medication or device or whatever they're studying. And then phase 4 happens after they're already approved on the market. They want to just continue to see what kind of effects are happening to people. The longer something's out there, the more we see. And you all see these stories with the COVID vaccines, right? They're all great. Get one if you can, get one when you can, get whatever one you can. The more people that get them, we're going to see, yeah, there's some more side effects. So the AIDS Clinical Trial Group is the large umbrella organization that was established in 1987 to look at HIV and AIDS. It was the world's largest and longest running clinical trials network. The mission is to cure HIV and reduce the burden of disease due to HIV infection and its complications, including tuberculosis and viral hepatitis. So we look at more than just HIV. We really look at a lot of infectious diseases in the AIDS Clinical Trial Group. Currently, there are 53 core clinical research sites in the AIDS Clinical Trial Group. 28 of them are here in the United States, and then 25 are international. The 15 countries are listed there, and there are 11 protocol specific, which means they might not be part of the larger organization, but they're doing 1 or 2 of the research studies that the organization supports. There are 52 active studies in the clinical trials group. They're all outpatient, which means they come to us. They're anywhere from phase 1 to phase 3. 14 are open for enrollment, which means I'm actively recruiting. Not exactly 14 here, but when it's open for enrollment, we recruit. And there's usually a number. We want 300 people in this study. We want 30,000 people in this study, whatever. 3 are going to open soon. 12 are close to accrual, which means that number was hit for recruitment enrollment. But those folks continue on the study that had been recruited until the study ends. Some are a year, some are a year and a half, we have one study that's going on for 3 decades now. 6 are closed to follow up. They're writing the papers, they're putting out the scientific articles, and 17 are still in development. So here at the Ohio State University, we call ourselves the AIDS Clinical Trial Unit. We're part of the group. We were established at the same time as the group was established back in 1987 by Dr. Robert Fass, who was the Division of Infectious Disease, the chief of the Division of Infectious Disease here at OSU. If you've attended AIDS walks in the past few years, the AIDS walk was named after him. We're hoping to make that happen again. Currently, Dr. Susan Kolatar is the leader of our clinical trial group. She is also the Division Director of Infectious Disease. We have 5 research coordinators, a pharmacist, data specialist, laboratory specialists. We're one of 28 in the nation that conducts federally sponsored research for HIV and AIDS and related illnesses. And we're staffed by expert multidisciplinary team of healthcare professionals. At the AIDS Clinical Trial Unit, volunteers may participate in studies that contribute to improving treatment outcomes and managing drug resistance, preventing and treating co-infections, and contributing to our increasing knowledge of treatment as prevention. Another important part of our clinical trials unit is our community advisory board. Members of the Community Advisory Board assist us in deciding what trials will work here. I host the CAB meetings the second Monday of every month. If you are interested in participating, we're not a real formal group. Of course, now we're all on Zoom or WebEx, but we used to meet the second Monday of the month down here in our first floor conference room, and I would buy food so people would come. People would come and talk to us about new studies. One of the important things that we do as a community advisory board from the AIDS clinical trial group is that we receive what they call a CAB draft. And a draft is an early idea. Scientists, doctors, like many of them who are participating today say, hey, we think this is going to be a good way to treat HIV or to prevent HIV. And this is how we're thinking about doing it. So they give these to the community advisory boards. The community advisory boards review it, ask questions, say, okay, but 12 visits in a week is too many, things like that. So when it goes back up to the chain of command, then when a protocol is developed, true community input is in those protocols. And folks on the community advisory board are people living with HIV, people who are HIV negative, people who are involved in our research studies, people who are just involved in HIV from our community partners, Equitas Health, Columbus Public Health. Folks, anyone who is interested in HIV and wants to learn more about the scientific process of it can attend our community advisory boards. Earlier, ACT UP was spoken about. These came about because Larry Kramer, who was the leader of ACT UP back in the early days, kind of stopped an NIH meeting with Dr. Anthony Fauci and said, hey, listen to us. In the beginning of their relationship, it was pretty rocky. Larry Kramer didn't think NIH and Anthony Fauci cared about the community, and Anthony brought him in and said, tell us what you need. This is what we want to do. How can we work better together? So years later, they have developed a great relationship. Unfortunately, Larry died last year. If you want to learn more about ACT UP and any of this work in HIV, look up any of Larry Kramer's work. That's just a picture of some of the folks on our community advisory board attending AIDS Walk. Probably the last time we were able to do that in person. Hopefully again in the future. So I borrowed this slide from one of my colleagues who has been here for a while. The initial studies at our AIDS clinical trial group is that when people were diagnosed with HIV, what we saw a lot were these opportunistic infections, these other diseases that were happening because we didn't have early testing and we didn't have, oh, my viral load is this or my CD4s are this. Basically, people came in because they were sick, they were tested for HIV, and they had no immune system, and that was what caused them to get a lot of these opportunistic infections. Pneumocystis pneumonia was the one that killed millions and millions of, well, I'm sorry, maybe hundreds of thousands of people in the beginning of the epidemic before they realized we can give them a simple antibiotic that's been around for a long time to stop that. But we knew when they were diagnosed with pneumocystis and HIV, you're going to have about 6 months to live. If you're diagnosed with Kaposi sarcoma, which is another one of those opportunistic infections, you might have had it a little more than a year. So our initial research in the beginning of HIV here at the OSU clinical trials in the 87, 88, 89 was really looking at how can we treat those opportunistic infections to give people a little bit better quality. The first clinical trial was 019, and then we talked about AZT. So this did look at AZT, and so why would people want to do AZT? There was nothing. So you go from having nothing and knowing you're going to die in 6 months, or I might try this. And there are those great people that said, okay, I'm going to try it. We learned pretty quickly that AZT might have been pretty toxic, but it did something in the beginning. Everything does something in the beginning, or it doesn't get to the stage where we can try it out in people. So AZT was the first thing. And if you are all Rent fans, you probably remember AZT break. So a lot of people did take that because it did prolong their lives for a little bit and help us learn a lot more. So moving beyond that, what have we done with our HIV research here? We were able to establish standards for the evolution of combination antiretroviral therapy. So we knew AZT, one pill, monotherapy, they call it, that wasn't enough. When you look at the scientific evolution of the virus, you know that there are many different stages of the viral replication, and we needed to do something to stop several of those stages. So we knew once we got people on antiretroviral therapy that looked at maybe a combination of at least 3 different drugs, we were able to really slow down the progression of the disease. And it was 1996 when the protease inhibitors were the ones that just really changed the course for a lot of people. I can remember back at the Columbus AIDS Task Force, seeing people, walking with 2 canes and coming in basically to say goodbye. And it seems like protease inhibitors came out the next day, and some of those folks are still with us. So they've done a lot. We've learned a lot about those as medication and still need to change some things and make it better. But those are some of the great things that have happened because of HIV research. We are also in the process of, we also developed the standard of care. You hear SOC standard of care is very important. Now there's information put out every year. Here's treatment guidelines, standards of care for this is what we do. These are the preferred medications. These are not preferred anymore. And those change as the years go on. Medications that were maybe preferred in the standard, hey, I'm on this, yay. Oh, well, now we have something a little bit better. That's moved down the list. So let's maybe change to something better. And then a lot of the treatments of those OIs, alphabet soup, PCP, pneumocystis pneumonia, CMV, cytomegalovirus, people went blind. All of those things were involved in that. We also established standards of care for HIV-1 and associated malignancies. And Dr. Bioki here at OSU is really involved with that. Moving forward now to current times, we are looking at long-acting injectable antiretroviral therapy. This particular study, long-acting antiretroviral therapy, has been recently FDA approved for people living with HIV. So we know these drugs work. This study is looking at finding out, do these drugs work in people that can't take pills every day for whatever reason? We know some adherence is the key to that U=U, but sometimes some folks just can't take a pill every day. It may be economic reasons. It may be social reasons. They may be homeless. They might not. They have mental health issues, other kinds of things. So we're looking at ways to make things even better. I'm just showing this crazy slide because we don't just say, hey, here you go, come in and take this medicine. There's a lot of criteria to decide whether or not somebody's going to be eligible or not eligible. And these are some of the things. For this particular study, it was really different for us because we were actually looking for people that aren't doing so well, haven't had an undetectable viral load recently, aren't able to take their meds and those kind of things. And so we put them in this medication study for the long-acting injectable, and hopefully we're going to be able to get them undetectable, and that the injectable is the way that's going to work for them. We continue to look at studies. If you look right here in the center, MAB, monoclonal antibodies are the wave of the future, I may say. Hopefully some of the docs will say, no, David's wrong. I don't know, maybe not. But if you watch too much TV like we all have during COVID, unless you have the fancy apps that cut out the commercials, you've probably seen way too many drug commercials. And if you look at the little scientific name in the small print, you're going to see MAB around psoriatic arthritis, Crohn's disease, those kind of things. Monoclonal antibody therapy has already been proven to work in certain diseases, and it's happening. We're looking at it at HIV. What a monoclonal antibody is some people actually do develop an immunity to HIV. But the problem is it doesn't happen until after the virus has destroyed a lot of their immune system. But that immunity is there, so they're able to take those antibodies and clone them in a lab and give people large infusions of these antibodies. And the question is, will this help them maintain viral suppression if we take medication away?
Mr.
So,
Andrist, friendly 5-minute warning. Sorry.
Pardon?
Friendly 5-minute warning. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. So we are looking at studies for people. This is just an example of a study for people who are healthy. So they're undetectable, have high, fairly decent CD4 cells, and no other histories of seizures or hepatitis. And we're going to give them these injectable drugs and the monoclonal antibody together to see if then we can take the HIV medication away for a while, and how long will they stay undetectable. We call it strategic treatment interruption. It's a frightening thing. I'm going to skip through some of these, or just some of our other studies. We're doing a phase 1 study on a trivalent broadly neutralizing antibody, which means it's working at more than one spot. We became part of the HIV Prevention Treatment Network in 2017, and we're involved in the HPTN 083 study, where we looked at long-acting cabotegravir for HIV prevention, or PrEP. This was studied in 4,500 people, and we were looking at how does long-acting injectable PrEP compare to Truvada, which is currently on the market for PrEP. The great thing is Both medications are amazingly great. If you are able to access Truvada for PrEP, do it. Take it every day. It's going to do what it's supposed to do. Eventually, cabotegravir is going to become available. It has been proven to actually be superior to daily oral PrEP, to daily Truvada. But again, Truvada is excellent. It's available now. Take it. Someday the injectables will be there. Not everybody wants to get a shot in the butt, so the pills are still going to be there. We have lots of ongoing studies. We got involved with COVID-19 because Anthony Fauci said, if you want to do research right in COVID, go to the AIDS clinical trial groups. This is the group of clinical trial folks in HIV that got involved with the COVID vaccine study and COVID treatment study. You may see on social media a lot of these sites that say, hey, come here. This is for folks. If you have people that, if you know people that contract COVID, we are looking at those monoclonal antibodies that I talked about earlier to prevent, or not prevent, but stop them from getting sick enough to go into the hospital. And it seems to be working. That study is ongoing. We were involved in the AstraZeneca vaccine study. We put over 130 people in that study. We had a wide range of demographic breakdowns for this. We were very excited. This all happened between October and January, so it was pretty quick. So this is important. How can you participate in studies? At OSU, we have something called studysearch.osumc.edu. It looks like this page right here. You can put in this box whatever thing you're looking at. HIV, COVID, weight loss, I've done a lot. Click the button. Studies that are happening here at OSU and are looking for people are going to pop up there, and you can contact them and say, hey, tell me more, I want to do it. On a national level, you can go even further and go to researchmatch.org. This is going to ask you, they're going to ask you a little bit more health-related questions. What kind of conditions are you looking at? And then again, you'll get emails from them. Hey, here's a study you might be interested in. You can say yes or no and move forward with more of that information. So I just want to leave you with a quote that I really like about research. Research is an expression of faith in the possibility of progress. The drive that leads scholars to study a topic has to include the belief that new things can be discovered, that newer can be better, and that greater depth of understanding is achievable. Research, especially academic research, is a form of optimism about the human condition. And I think we could all use a little bit of optimism about the human condition. So with that, I end. My contact information is there. I'll put it in the chat. Feel free to call me, email me. If you have questions about PrEP, let's talk. You should talk to your primary care doctor, but if you don't have one, there's plenty of opportunities for you to get on PrEP, and please do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation. It's just so great to hear about all the great stuff OSU in the AIDS Clinical Trial Unit is doing.